Hey guys, welcome back to Games.Tech, and today I'm starting another new series. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm starting a new series in this channel. As you might have seen from the title, we're talking about cinematography. So I'm talking something more professional kind of cinematography. Buy a gimbal or buy a Steadicam that is too professional. I'm talking the mid-tier. But I would suggest you go for a gimbal. Yeah, I would rather suggest you go for a gimbal rather than a Steadicam or a glide cam, because those are expensive as hell. You get glide cams for about $800 US, which is about 80 to 75,000 INR. And also a Steadicam costs somewhere around the neighborhood of 200 USD to 400 USD, which is almost about 20,000 INR to 40,000 INR, which is just damn expensive just to stabilize your camera shake and camera movements. I would rather recommend you follow the three-hand principle, which is the neck and your arms involving and your camera's strapped running over your neck. So just hold your camera right here, hold your lens down below, so you have a support move down below, and for the left-right shake have another support on your right. It might look awkward while you're on the studio or while you're setting up your stage, or while you're setting up your studio, whatever the arena is that you're setting up. It might look weird you holding the camera like this, but trust me, it stabilizes a hell lot of shakiness. So basically what you do, you take your strap that came with the kit and your camera, strap it around your neck, and then snap it on your camera, and then hold that tension. Just take your your right arm, just push forward to it, just like give that clamp, give that push on that, so it's the neck strap just hangs just very tightly on your neck. And also get your left hand, put it on the bottom, and also take your three fingers, which is your thumb, your index, and your middle finger, and just hold your lens. And then next, your palm and your two end fingers, which are your pinky and your ring finger, will support the bottom of the camera, holding it like something like so. Something like so. Also, I would actually recommend you buy a gimbal rather than a Steadicam or a glide cam, because gimbals are way cheaper considering these two, and also are way easier to use. If you have the practice to use a gimbal, you'll find it way easier to use rather than a Steadicam or a glide cam, because a Steadicam and a glide cam uses you need your muscles to really hold that camera with all the weight on the bottom, and also it has no digital stabilization. Both these work on the simple principle of gravity, so where the weights move, the camera moves too. So if you're stepping on, like walking from side to side, you just have it jerk suddenly and the jerky footage just comes on the camera. Whereas in a 3-axis gimbal, the jerk just minimalizes just to a shake, kind of like a small shake. So you don't have to worry about a lot of shaky footage in your final product. Other advantages of the gimbal are it's very light compared to a glide cam or a Steadicam. I keep on saying glide cam or a Steadicam. Let's just keep it as a glide cam for now. It's way cheaper, and also it is way easier to use if you've already calibrated. Put your camera on, you've already calibrated to a specific camera, something like a GH5 or a Canon 70D, something like that. You have no issues. You can just screw your camera back on and you can start shooting wherever you are. So the thing is, specific cameras have specific gimbals for specific weights. If you use a GH5 in an Osmo, you're gonna get way better stabilization because the weight is calibrated for this. If it doesn't make sense, comment down below. I will be making an in-depth video about gimbals. Secondly, in cinematography, the main thing everyone will say wherever you go is LIGHTS, which is lights. You're gonna need a ton lot of light if you're shooting something like a very slow motion footage. You're gonna need a lot more light letting into that lens rather than just giving a bit like one LED panel something light. It's not gonna work. You're gonna need a lot of light when you're shooting slow motion. Not something like 120 frames per second in your iPhone or 220 frames per second in your iPhone or in Samsung Galaxy. It digitally adjusts the exposure for you to get the proper amount of light after the light hits the sensor, which actually means that when there's a specific amount of light hitting the sensor, your processor, not your camera, processor actually processes the information and then adjust the ISO, which is almost something like a digital exposure thing, not something you would manually adjust in your camera. But ISO is something digital that actually cuts off a bit of light digitally from after it's taking the picture. So what your iPhone does or your Samsung Galaxy does when you're taking slow motion is that it actually bumps up the ISO so you get a correct exposed footage. But what regular cinema cameras or regular DSLRs do is that it lets you adjust the ISO and the exposure manually. And if you're suddenly shooting slow motion and it comes too dark and you cannot even adjust in post-production, so what you could do is bump up the exposure all the way up if you're shooting a very high frame rate video, so you're gonna slow it down a lot. So that time expose all the lights you've got, but do keep in mind, do open the LCD display and look if your image is overexposed, because if it's overexposed it's gonna look very bad. Right now I'm using a 2-light setup. I'm also giving some backlights, which I'm using some tungsten bulbs in the background so that you can get this nice warm light. Let me switch off the background lights, which is gonna give me a kind of depth in my image. It actually gives a softer shadow. As you can see, if I put my hand right in front, you can see the shadow getting very hard. But as I move away from the background, you can see that there's no or almost no shadows back of me. Now let me turn off the background light I've got, and then I'll slowly turn off all the lights I've got, and I'll tell you what's the difference. So yeah, I'm back, and now you can see my background lights are off, and also you can see a bit of hard shadow of my face casting right there, my whole body casting right there. That is not good, because sometimes in the video you do need shadows to add that depth, to add to separate the subject from the foreground and the background, so it actually adds a bit of depth. But sometimes you don't want that shadow to come in your videos, and those are the times where you use a background light, something like this. You just have to filter those background lights off by using a brighter or a warmer color light. If you're using something like this, I have a yellow painted wall, so I'm using a warm light to actually kind of match the colors and try to cut or filter out the shadows. But if you have something like a white background, use something like an LED or a CFL or a tube light on a tube light stand. Let me point out another thing. I'm using a tungsten bulb right here. As per your vision, it's on the white side. I'm using a tungsten bulb on my right side to give a bit of warmth, and I'm using an LED bulb on my left side with a blue colored gel attached to it to give this blue effect. Now you might have a question, what happens if I remove the blue gels? Well, my whole face on this side will become white, pure LED white, which is something like this. So yeah, and the light is hitting me way harsh. You can see the shadows on the back. You can see this is way sharper over here. You can see this is way sharp. This is not acceptable. And also you cannot see the tungsten bulb's shadow on me casting over here, because this light is way brighter than this. I've been using gels so that I can block a bit of light and also add a bit of color, so you can add a bit of depth to my video. Now you might have another question, what happens if I remove the soft layer, like the white cover on the front of the bulb, and make a harsh light white this way, because this is harsh, so why not use another harsh light without softening the light? What happens? Pretty much this happens. This is just utter unacceptable. There's very harsh shadows on my back. You can see there's a very harsh shadow, a bigger head of my head, and you can also see another shadow coming from that light right on this side. This is not good at all. You always want to soften your lights, something like this, and well, pretty much you've got a way softer shadow casting right here. This is way soft, and also you can see none of a harsh shadow. Even when I move so close, the shadow is just very acceptable. It's very soft, very mellow, is what I'm trying to say. And also, if you want to minimize these shadows, do add a background light, which looks something like this. Now I'm pretty much in the correct exposure. From your view, the left side is properly lit with a blue gel and an LED, and my right side is properly lit with a tungsten light and a softbox. And also the background is being cut off by all the background lights that I've got, which is 2 tungsten lights and 1 warm colored LED light. This is how a proper setup should be. Let me rephrase everything that I said. Use cheaper gear if you're just starting out in cinematography. Don't suddenly go to a shop, buy a high graded camera, buy good stabilizers, buy a glide cam, buy a shoulder rig, buy a shoulder wrist, shoulder strap, buy a head mount, and all those kind of crazy stuff just yet. If you're starting out right now, use whatever you have. Don't use expensive DSLR. If you want to shoot good video, use a cheaper sided DSLR, something like the T7i or something like the Canon M50, which shoots 4K at 30 frames per second, which is pretty sweet considering the price. It costs about 40 USD or 30 USD with Amazon discounts, and also which is almost about 40,000 to 30,000 INR. And also, to start up with the kit lens, don't go to an online search and browse and buy Sigma lenses quite yet, or something like the Canon L series lenses quite yet. Don't spend all your money on expensive gear just yet. Use what you got. Even if you don't have a DSLR, that's fine, because most of the phones have good enough cameras, something like 25 megapixels, 16 megapixels, 19 megapixels on Sony phones, which is pretty amazing considering that phones have such megapixel count in their cameras. The thing they're lacking is the lens. It doesn't add quite the depth that DSLRs add. Doesn't have such video processing power, so not a lot of them shoot at 120 or 240 or even 60 frames per second. Almost most of the mid-range cameras or most of the low-end phone cameras shoot at 30 or 24 frames per second, so that they can reduce the cost of the camera sensor, also the cost of the processor, and also also the space of your internal storage and the external storage where you're storing the video at. So yeah, these are some of the points. Also, the other phases that I gave is that do use lights. Lights are very important when you're setting up a video, even if you're shooting some photography, even if you're shooting videography, anything in those ranges, lights are important if you're using some good camera and some good camera gear and some good studio. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, do like it, and also if you like my channel, do get subscribed, and also hit the bell to get the latest notifications. Also, do comment down below what you'd like to see next, or some of the ideas you'd like to give it to me. So I will be reporting to you guys soon. Until then, I'm your host Raj, and I'm signing off. Peace.